It's funny. We always fall back on the construction analogy when we're talking about building software. We love it. We talk about architects, builders, foundations.
Right, it's a comforting metaphor. Makes it all feel solid.
It does. But look, if you've ever been on a real construction site, one where things are actually going sideways,
Mm-hmm.
the steel shipment is late, the permits are lost, the ground is literally sinking,
Uh-huh.
you realize pretty fast that the hammering, the actual building part, isn't the hardest part.
Oh, not at all. The hard part is the bureaucracy. It's the blueprints, the permissions, the arguments in that little construction trailer about who's supposed to be paying for the cement delivery.
Exactly. It's all the stuff that keeps the building from falling over legally and structurally before you've even poured a single drop of concrete.
Yeah.
And that, right there, is why we are pulling apart BSE and ISO EC 23894.2024 today.
And specifically Clause 5.
Clause 5, the framework clause. And I know what you're thinking. Framework sounds so dry. It sounds like a PowerPoint slide you have to sit through after lunch on a Tuesday.
It does have that reputation.
But if you think of Clause 6 of this standard as the actual battle, the risk assessment, finding the bugs, then Clause 5 is the war room. It's the entire infrastructure that decides if you're even capable of fighting that battle in the first place.
That's a really good distinction. A lot of organizations, they want to jump straight to Clause 6. They want to get their hands dirty with the actual risk assessment. Is this AI model biased? Is that data set secure?
Fun stuff.
The fun stuff, yeah. But the standard is really specific here. If you skip Clause 5, your risk assessment is it's just a piece of paper. It has no teeth. It's like an academic exercise.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to give it teeth. We're going to act as your instructors today. We're going to walk through this clause, section by section, from leadership all the way down to improvement, and try to figure out what this actually looks like for a real company that, doesn't want to get sued into oblivion.
Or canceled, or go bankrupt.
Or just get deeply publicly embarrassed.
All of the above.
So we've got the roadmap. We'll start with 5.1 general and 5.2 leadership, then hit that little bridge in 5.3. After that, the massive deep dive into 5.4 design, which is where all the really scary stuff lives. And then we'll wrap up with the execution part in 5.5 through 5.7.
Sounds good.
So let's start at the top, 5.1 general.
Right. So 5.1, it basically sets the stage. It states the primary purpose of this whole risk management framework. And the text is super clear. Its purpose is to, and I'm quoting loosely here, assist the organization in integrating risk management into significant activities and functions.
Okay, hold on. Integrating into significant activities. That sounds like corporate speak. It's the kind of phrase you see on a motivational poster in the break room, right next to one with an eagle on it.
It does sound like it.
What does that actually look like on the ground? Because, let's be honest, in most companies, risk management is just the department that says no to everything the fun departments want to do.
And that's exactly the failure mode this clause is trying to prevent. 5.1 is arguing for the complete opposite of that. It means AI risk management can't just be a side project. It can't be something that, 3 people in the basement work on a Friday afternoon while the real engineers are shipping code.
So it's not a checkbox?
It's not a checkbox. The standard is telling us that risk management has to be woven into the very fabric of the company. It's about assembling all the relevant information so that the decision makers, the people actually running the business, can address risk in a smart way.
But define decision makers here. Are we talking about the project manager, or are we talking about the C-suite?
Both. And that's the key. That's why the text explicitly references another standard right here in the first section, IEC 38507.
Ah, I saw that. That's the one about governance of IT, right?
It is. And that little citation, it's so crucial because it elevates this entire conversation. We're not just talking about technical bug fixes or running some unit tests anymore. We are talking about capital G governance.
Okay.
The text says the governing body, so the board, the execs, they're the ones who have to define the organization's overall risk appetite.
Risk appetite. Man, I have heard that term thrown around a million times. It always makes it sound like we're at a buffet. I'll have a small plate of the financial risk and maybe a little bit of the reputational risk on the side, please.
In a way, it is a buffet. But instead of shrimp and steak, the choices are, radical innovation versus potential catastrophic failure. Risk appetite is basically the organization asking itself, how much risk are we willing to stomach in order to achieve our goals?
Okay, that makes sense.
But here is where it gets really, really tricky with AI specifically.
Cool.
Well, in finance, risk appetite is mostly math. It's quantifiable. We are comfortable with a 2% chance of losing this portfolio. You can put a number on it.
Right.
In AI, risk appetite is so much fuzzier. What is your appetite for your new chatbot hallucinating a racial slur and it ending up on the front page of the news? What's your appetite for your medical AI misdiagnosing one in 10,000 patients?
I mean, presumably zero. You'd want zero risk for that.
Ideally, yes, absolutely. But if you demand zero risk, you often can't use generative AI at all. The technology isn't there yet. So 5.1 is forcing the organization to stop pretending. You have to actually sit down and define those boundaries.
So you have to have the uncomfortable conversation.
You have to. If you don't have that governance layer, which is what 5.1 is mandating, then your engineers are out there building these incredibly powerful AI systems without knowing where the guardrails are. They're like driving a Ferrari at night with the headlights off.
So 5.1 is basically saying, make this official and make it part of how you actually govern the entire company. Which I guess leads us perfectly into 5.2, leadership and commitment.
Yep.
Because you can't have governance without leaders. But to be honest, this is usually the part of any ISO standard where my eyes just kind of glaze over. Like, of course leadership should be committed. Do we really need a multi-page standard to tell us the CEO should care about their own company?
You'd be surprised. Or maybe you wouldn't be. The thing is, the standard isn't just saying the CDO should care. It's saying the CEO needs to be accountable. That's a very specific word the text uses over and over. Accountability. And in the context of AI, that word is terrifying for a lot of executives.
Because if the AI makes a huge mistake, like hallucinates a legal precedent and completely tanks a court case, the CEO wants to be able to blame the vendor or the engineer or just throw their hands up and say, it was the black box.
Exactly. And Section 5.2 is designed to remove that plausible deniability. It says top management has to ensure the right resources are available, that the policy is communicated. It's forcing a really direct conversation about trust.
Trust is a really big word in this part of the text, isn't it?
It's huge. And think about the nature of AI. It's often opaque. It's incredibly complex. For stakeholders to accept an AI system, customers, regulators, even your own employees, they need to trust it. And the standard says something like, demonstrating this level of leadership and commitment can be critical for ensuring that stakeholders have confidence that AI is being developed and used responsibly.
So it's all about the tone from the top. If the CEO doesn't seem to genuinely care about AI safety, then why would anyone else in the company?
That's it in a nutshell. And the text gives some very actionable guidance here, which is nice.
Yeah.
It suggests that organizations should consider, and I'm pretty much quoting here, issuing statements about their commitment to AI risk management.
We like a press release or an internal memo to all staff.
It could be both. Or a statement on their website. It's about broadcasting that confidence. It's not enough for the leadership to just quietly support risk management in their heads or in a closed-door meeting.
You have to say it out loud.
They need to say it out loud. They need to tell their employees, their customers, and their regulators, we take this seriously, and here's how. It's a signal to everyone.
That makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like the captain of a ship coming over the intercom during a storm and saying, hey, everyone, we're going to navigate these choppy waters safely. It calms the passengers down.
And it empowers the crew, right? They know the captain has a plan. But of course, words aren't enough. 5.2 also clearly mentions resource allocation. Management needs to be aware of the specialized resources that are needed.
Okay, this is where I see so many companies falling down. They say their risk appetite is zero. We want zero errors, we demand perfect safety, but then they fund the project like it's a scrappy startup in a garage.
Which is a direct violation of Clause 5.2. If you state a low-risk appetite, but you only provide a low budget, you aren't compliant. You can't demand, NASA-level safety on a college intern summer project at budget.
Right.
The framework immediately exposes that gap. It forces you to admit you need specific skills, you need the right technology, and you need actual money to manage AI risk properly.
Okay, so we've got the directive from 5.1, we've got the boss on board, and hopefully writing checks from 5.2. Now we move to 5.3, integration. The text here is pretty brief, mainly just referring back to the main risk standard, ISO 31000. Is this just like a transition clause?
It is a transition, but the concept behind it is vital. The main idea here is the bridge concept. 5.3 is reinforcing that your AI risk management shouldn't be its own little island.
Okay.
Your company, if it's big enough, likely already has a risk management department. They handle financial risk, cybersecurity risk, operational risk.
Right. Most big companies have a whole floor of people who are paid to worry for a living.
Exactly. And the standard is saying, do not go and build a separate, shiny new castle for AI risk. Integrate it. Use the structures you already have. If you create a silo, a separate AI risk team that doesn't talk to legal or compliance or InfoSec,
You're in trouble.
you're in big trouble. Silos are where risks go to hide and grow.
So don't reinvent the wheel. Just, I don't know, upgrade the tire so it can handle the new AI terrain.
That is a perfect analogy. And that brings us to the absolute meat of this whole clause, 5.4 design.
Yes. Okay, this is where it gets really good. Specifically, 5.4.1, understanding the organization and its context.
This is the deepest part of our dive today. This is where the standard stops being generic and gets incredibly specific about the weirdness of AI. The text gives us two massive tables, Table 2 and Table 3, that break down the external and the internal context.
Right. And as instructors, we really need to walk through these because this is basically a checklist of all the stuff that can hurt you. So let's start with Table 2, the external context. This is like looking out the window at the world around your organization.
Correct. The first big category in Table 2 covers legal, regulatory, and ethical factors. Now, obviously, you have to follow the law. That's a given. But the text goes way further. It highlights guidelines on ethical use and design of AI that are issued by government bodies, regulators, and even academia.
So it's not just about what will get me sued. It's more like what will get me flamed on social media and dragged in front of a congressional hearing.
Exactly. It encompasses soft law and shifting ethical norms. And the text points out that these guidelines are often domain-specific. The ethical framework for a medical AI that's diagnosing cancer is going to be very different from an AI that's just recommending movies. You have to know the specific rules of the playground you're in.
Okay, moving down the table, we see stakeholder perceptions. And there's a word in here I want to pull out. Opaqueness.
Yes, that's a huge risk factor. Stakeholder perceptions are driven by issues like transparency and bias, and the standard uses this word opaqueness, the idea that the AI is a black box. If your external stakeholders, your customers, the public, the regulators, feel like they can't see inside that box,
They get scared.
they perceive a much higher risk. Yeah.
It's the fear of the unknown. I mean, if I apply for a loan and an AI denies me and the bank just says, sorry, the computer said no and we have no idea why, that's opaqueness. And that creates a massive reputational risk for the bank.
Precisely. The text creates a direct link between that lack of transparency and how stakeholders perceive you. It also mentions their expectations on the availability of AI models. Stakeholders might expect your AI to be open source or to have a user interface that clearly explains its decisions. If you don't meet those expectations, you have a context gap, and that's a risk.
Next on the list in Table 2 is contractual relationships. This one feels very, very practical.
It is extremely practical. Your framework has to consider ownership, usage rights, training data guarantees. Think about it. Most companies aren't building their own large language models from scratch.
No way.
They're renting them. They're using an API from one of the big providers.
Right, so if I'm building my cool new app on top of somebody else's AI model, my risk is now tied to their risk.
Exactly. You've hit it. The text warns us to think about this. Are we making sure our third-party vendor meets our own risk standards? What are their data guarantees? What happens if that vendor suddenly changes their terms of service or if their model starts hallucinating political misinformation? That is now your external risk. You are inheriting their problems.
It's a supply chain risk. If the steel for the skyscraper is faulty, it doesn't matter how brilliant the architect is. The building is still unsafe.
Which flows perfectly into the next point in the table. Complexity of networks. The text says the use of AI increases the complexity of networks and dependencies. Table 2 is highlighting that this complexity makes the whole system more fragile. A failure in one tiny, obscure dependency you didn't even know you had can bring down your whole operation.
Now, the last point on this external table is the one that really stood out to me. It talks about legacy systems, and specifically, the risk of replacing them.
This is such a crucial point, and it's so often overlooked in the hype cycle. The text notes that an AI system can replace an existing system. The risk here isn't just that the new AI might fail. The risk is losing what the standard calls safety knowledge or organizational memory.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Can you, give me an example of that?
Sure. Let's say you have a logistics company. You've got a team of human dispatchers who've been routing trucks for 20 years. They just know stuff. They know that when it rains on a Tuesday afternoon, you have to avoid Route 9 because that one underpass always floods, even though the map says it's clear.
Okay, that's safety knowledge.
It's institutional wisdom. It's not written down anywhere. Now, you come in and you replace them with a slick new AI optimization engine. It's faster, it's cheaper, the executives love it, but it doesn't know about the flooding on Route 9 because that specific piece of data was never in its training set.
And you've already fired the humans who did know.
You fired the humans. So when the flood happens, the AI blindly sends a dozen trucks straight into the water, and there is no human left in the building who has the authority or the knowledge to override it.
Wow.
That legacy system, the humans, or even the clunky old software, it had a kind of built-in resilience that you might not even be aware of until it's gone. And that is a massive external context risk.
Wow, that's a heavy one.
Right.
Okay, let's pivot. We've looked out the window of the world. Now let's look in the mirror. Table 3, the internal context. This is all about what's happening inside the walls of your own building.
And this is where the standard gets into the psychology and the real capability of the organization itself. And the first big category here is culture.
And right away, the text just drops a bomb. It explicitly mentions the change to the number of human resources needed and the risk of de-skilling.
This connects directly to what we just discussed with legacy systems, but it's focused internally. De-skilling is the loss of expertise that happens when human decision-making is either supported or completely replaced by AI.
I really want to linger on this for a second. De-skilling. It sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie.
It's a very, very real business risk that's happening right now. Let's take a law firm as an example.
Okay, how far?
So traditionally, junior associates learn the trade by doing the grunt work. They write the boring first drafts of contracts. They spend hundreds of hours reading through thousands of pages of discovery documents. That's how they learn to eventually become senior partners.
Right, they cut their teeth on all the boring stuff.
That's how you learn. Exactly. Now imagine you bring in a powerful AI tool that does all of that grunt work in seconds. The partners love it, it's cheap, it's fast, and increases billable hours. But the junior associates, they stop doing the actual writing. They just become reviewers of the AI's output.
So they never learn the fundamentals of why a contract is structured a certain way.
They never learn it. 10 years go by. The senior partners who knew how to do it all start to retire. Who takes over? You've got a whole generation of mid-level lawyers who have never actually drafted a complex contract from scratch. They don't know why that clause is written that way. They only know that the AI produced it.
That is terrifying. It's not just about people losing their jobs. It's about the whole organization losing the ability to do its core job. The organization becomes stupid because the AI is so smart.
That's it. It's organizational amnesia. And this framework demands that you account for this risk. If your internal context is we are rapidly de-skilling our workforce, that is a high-risk environment. And you need to mitigate it maybe by forcing humans to do the work manually sometimes, just to keep the skills sharp.
Okay, so moving on to capabilities and knowledge. The text asks, does the organization have the capital, time, people, intellectual property, processes, and systems?
And it highlights a very specific gap: the need for deep knowledge in AI technologies and data science. This seems obvious, but you'd be amazed how many companies try to deploy complex AI without having anyone on staff who actually understands the underlying math or statistics.
Which leads right into the next point, tools and platforms. The text warns about the availability of all these new AI tools that enable development without requiring full understanding.
This is basically the script kiddie problem from the world of cybersecurity but applied to AI. You can download a Python library or use a drag-and-drop AutoML platform and build a seemingly functional model in an afternoon.
Anyone can do it. Even I could probably do it.
But the text explicitly warns about the risk of using these tools without truly grasping their limitations and potential pitfalls. If you don't know how the black box works, you have no idea when it's lying to you.
So just because you can build it with a tool doesn't mean you should, or that you understand what's going to happen when it breaks.
Correct. If you don't know how the tool works, you can't possibly assess the risk. You are just flying blind.
Another key point here in Table 3 is data and information flows. The text says AI is used to automate, optimize, and enhance data handling.
But there's a big constraint. The text notes that quality and completeness constraints on data can impose limits on what the AI can do. This is the classic garbage in, garbage out problem. But in the internal context, it's asking a deeper question. Do we actually have the data pipelines to support this? Is our data clean? Is it biased? Is it even legally sourced? If your internal data house is a complete mess, your shiny new AI house will collapse.
And finally, for the internal context, internal stakeholders. And this specifically includes employees.
Yes, and their privacy expectations. plus the need for specialized training. The text mentions education on failure modes. And this is really interesting. It's not just about training people on how to use the AI, it's about training them on how the AI fails.
Yeah, that is a great distinction. It's the difference between here is how to use the new chatbot and here's what it looks like when the new chatbot is confidently making things up.
Exactly. If your internal team doesn't know what a failure mode looks like, they will just accept bad outputs as truth. And that is a massive, massive internal risk.
Okay, so that's 5.4.1, a really comprehensive look at the world outside and the world inside. Now, the rest 4 clause 5.4, so 5.4.2 through 5.4.5, this seems to be about actually structuring the commitment we talked about back in the leadership section.
Yes, this is kind of the logistics block. 5.4.2 articulating commitment and 5.4.4 allocating resources. These sections largely just refer you back to the base standard ISO 31000, but 5.4.3 assigning roles is absolutely critical.
Because that old saying is true, right?
Yeah.
If everyone is responsible, then no one is responsible.
That's exactly it. Top management and the oversight bodies, they have to identify actual individuals. The text asks, who has the authority and responsibility to address AI risks? It's not enough to just say the IT department will handle it. You need a name, you need a role. You need to be able to point to someone and say, that person has the authority to pull the plug if this AI goes rogue.
That seems like a job that nobody would want. Hi, I'm the person who gets to kill our most profitable AI project if it gets weird.
It's a very tough job. But someone has to have their hand on the kill switch. Otherwise, organizational momentum just takes over and nobody stops the train.
And 5.4.5, communication and consultation. This goes back to what we said about building trust. You have to keep the lines of communication open, both internally and externally.
Right. So to kind of summarize this whole design block, we've understood our context. That was the 2 scary tables. We've assigned the roles, who does what, and we've allocated the resources, the money, and the tools. Now the framework is officially designed. The blueprint is done.
Which brings us to 5.5 implementation. The text is pretty short here, again, just referring to ISO 31000. But what does this mean in our building a house analogy?
This is where we actually move in. We've designed the blueprint. We've hired the crew. We've bought the materials. Implementation is where the design we just spent all this time on, the context analysis, the role assignments, gets deployed into the organization's actual daily workflow. It stops being a document in a binder and starts being a real-world practice.
But implementation is never perfect. The map is never the territory.
Which is precisely why the very next section is 5.6, evaluation.
Right, measuring success. How do we know if this framework is actually working?
The text says we need to periodically measure the framework's performance against the objectives we defined way back in the leadership phase. Are we actually catching risks early? Is our stated risk appetite being respected in practice? Or are our teams constantly crossing the lines we drew?
And then finally, 5.7, improvement. This seems especially important for something like AI, which is moving so fast. I feel like this needs more than just a quick nod to ISO 31000.
It is absolutely vital. You have 5.7.1 adapting and 5.7.2 continually improving. And while the text refers you to the base standard, the implication for AI is profound. Because AI systems, they drift.
Drift. What do you mean by drift?
The data changes. The world it operates in changes. The user's behavior changes. An AI model that was perfectly safe and accurate in January might become wildly unsafe by June simply because the input data it's seeing in the real world has shifted.
So the framework can't be carved in stone. It has to be,
Yeah.
like living tissue.
It has to be living tissue. It must adapt. If your framework was perfectly designed for the AI models of 2023, it might be completely obsolete for the models of 2026. You have to continually improve the framework itself just to keep up with the technology you're trying to manage. If you treat this as a one-time set-it-and-forget-it compliance task, you are going to fail spectacularly.
So we've done it. We built the house of AI risk management. Let's just quickly recap the structure we put together here.
Sure. So the foundation, that was 5.2, leadership and commitment. Without the resources and the tone from the top, the whole thing crumbles.
And the walls. That has to be 5.4 design, and especially the context. The external walls protect us from things like legal storms and angry stakeholders.
And the internal walls are what structure our own culture and our capabilities, making sure we don't collapse from the inside.
Which means the roof is that ongoing cycle of 5.6 evaluation and 5.7 improvement. It protects the whole structure from the changing weather and makes sure it stays functional over time.
And I guess 5.1 general was the building permit that allowed us to start construction in the first place.
I like it. Okay, so what does this all mean? The So what? Why should our listener, who might just be a developer or a project manager trying to get a project approved, care about this seemingly bureaucratic Clause 5?
Because without this framework, any risk assessment, you do all the cool stuff in Clause 6, it's just a one-time exercise. It's a checkbox you tick to make someone happy. Clause 5 is what turns risk management into a capability of the organization, not just a compliance task. It ensures that when you do find a risk, you actually have the people, the budget, and the authority to fix it.
It changes risk management from being something we have to do to being something we are actually good at.
Well put.
Before we sign off, I just want to leave everyone with one final thought that really stuck with me from that internal context section. We talked about descaling and replacing legacy systems.
Yeah, that's probably the most haunting part of the whole standard for me.
So think about this. The standard is explicitly warning you that relying too much on AI can make your entire organization literally forget how to do the very thing the AI is doing. So here's the question. If your risk framework doesn't account for the human intelligence you lose when you deploy artificial intelligence, are you actually making your organization safer? Or did you just trade a known, risk-simple human error for a much more dangerous, unknown risk? Total organizational amnesia.
That is the question every single leader needs to have a good answer for before they flip the switch on a new AI.
And that is a wrap on our deep dive into Clause 5 of ISO IEC 23894. We'll see you next time.
Stay safe out there.